Never judge someone by how they look. One luxury store manager thought she could get away with mocking a casually dressed woman. But when the most unexpected guest walked through the door, her entire world collapsed. We've all heard stories about people getting treated differently just because of their appearance. But what if I told you that this time the one doing the judging got humiliated in front of the entire store? Today's story will show you exactly how a simple act of arrogance can ruin a career, and how kindness and respect always come out on top. It began just like any other afternoon inside one of the most prestigious and exclusive boutiques in the heart of the city. The kind of place that didn't just sell clothes, but sold the illusion of belonging to an elite world. The heavy glass doors, so polished they looked invisible, slid open without so much as a whisper, as if they had been programmed to only welcome the right kind of person. The moment you stepped inside, you were greeted by the faint but unmistakable scent of imported perfumes mingling with the rich aroma of genuine leather. Every detail of the boutique was perfectly curated to make visitors feel like they were standing inside a work of art, as long as they fit the part. The boutique's glossy marble floors reflected the soft golden lighting that made every diamond bracelet sparkle just a little brighter, and every silk gown shimmer as though it had been spun from liquid gold. Shelves were lined with designer handbags, each one sitting like a crown jewel behind glass, carrying a price tag larger than most people's monthly salary. Along the walls, floor-length mirrors stretched from end to end, reflecting rows of dresses crafted by names you only heard at award shows, the kind of garments so expensive they didn't dare display the price. In this boutique, if you had to ask, you simply couldn't afford it. And at the very center of this little kingdom stood Vanessa, the boutique's manager and self-proclaimed guardian of luxury. Vanessa didn't just oversee sales and schedules. No. In her mind, she was the final authority on who belonged inside those walls. To her, this wasn't merely a shop. It was her stage. And every customer who walked through those doors was immediately judged, categorized, and either welcomed with open arms or dismissed with a cold, practiced glance. From behind the counter, Vanessa watched every person enter with the precision of a hawk scanning for prey. Her gaze swept over their clothes, their shoes, their posture, searching for any hint of whether they were worthy of her time. Crisp, tailored suits, VIP service, designer heels, complimentary champagne on arrival. But sneakers, hoodies, plain jeans, not even worth a second glance. In Vanessa's eyes, if you didn't look rich, you weren't rich. And if you weren't rich, you certainly didn't belong in her store. So when Emma Watson walked through the door that afternoon, Vanessa clocked her from the very first step. Worn-out sneakers, faded jeans, an oversized plain sweatshirt that looked more appropriate for grocery shopping than browsing high-end fashion. No jewelry, no makeup, no visible signs of wealth, no assistant trailing behind her carrying shopping bags. Just a quiet, unassuming woman who, in Vanessa's opinion, had absolutely no business stepping foot inside this boutique. Vanessa scoffed under her breath, barely able to hide her irritation. There were unspoken rules in places like this, and Emma was breaking all of them. And the worst part? Emma didn't even seem to realize it. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't nervously checking price tags. She was strolling casually from display to display, trailing her fingertips across silk blouses and hand-stitched coats like she owned the place. The audacity. From behind the counter, Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Each second that passed made her more and more agitated. To her, Emma's presence was an offense, an eyesore in her otherwise perfect establishment. It wasn't just about money. It was about preserving the boutique's image. Allowing someone like Emma to browse freely among the haute couture was, in Vanessa's mind, the equivalent of letting someone bring fast food into a five-star restaurant. She decided enough was enough. With a smile as fake as the knockoff purses she imagined Emma probably owned, Vanessa strutted across the showroom floor. Every step of her designer heels echoed sharply off the marble, as if punctuating her disapproval. She tilted her head in that slow, patronizing way that people do when they're pretending to be nice but can't quite hide the disgust behind their eyes. "Hi there," Vanessa cooed, her voice dripping with syrupy sweetness that was anything but sincere. "Just so you know, our clearance section is towards the back. You might find something a little more suitable back there." The words hovered in the air like smoke. On paper, they were harmless, polite even, but the message underneath was clear as day. You don't belong here. Emma looked up, startled for just a brief moment. But then, rather than defend herself or storm out, She simply nodded and returned her attention to the clothes, calm, quiet, unbothered, as if Vanessa's insult hadn't landed at all. It was as if Emma had heard this kind of comment 1,000 times before and learned long ago that responding only gave people like Vanessa exactly what they wanted. But Vanessa wasn't satisfied. She wasn't used to being ignored, and the more Emma brushed her off, the more determined Vanessa became to make her point. A few minutes later, Emma paused in front of a mannequin draped in one of the boutique's crown jewels, a floor-length gown from an exclusive designer collection. The dress shimmered under the showroom lights, delicate crystals sewn into the fabric catching the light with every movement. It was the kind of gown that rarely left the rack. Clients had to book private fittings just to try it on. Vanessa saw Emma admiring the gown and nearly sprinted across the room. "Oh, that piece is part of our private collection," Vanessa announced loudly, making sure the other customers within earshot caught every word. "It's quite expensive. Maybe you'd like to try something a little more reasonable?" By now, the entire vibe of the store had shifted. You could feel the tension in the air like static electricity. Other shoppers glanced over, some pretending to be uninterested, others clearly enjoying the show. A few exchanged smirks, waiting to see how this plainly dressed woman would react to being publicly put in her place. But Emma, she simply smiled. A small, knowing smile. One that said, "You have no idea who you're talking to." She showed no embarrassment, no anger, just quiet, graceful patience. The kind of patience that only comes from someone who knows exactly how this story is going to end. And the truth was, Vanessa didn't have a clue. She couldn't have known that the woman she was so eager to dismiss wasn't just another window shopper. Emma was someone who existed in a world Vanessa only dreamed about. Someone who had access to people, places, and resources that made the entire boutique, and Vanessa's role within it, feel laughably small. But instead of announcing who she was, instead of pulling out a black card or demanding VIP service, Emma did what people with real power often do. She waited. And right on cue, as if the universe decided it was time to reveal the twist, the front doors of the boutique opened, and in walked Bryan Cranston. And from that moment on, Vanessa's nightmare was only just beginning. The moment Vanessa's condescending words left her lips, something shifted. It was almost imperceptible at first. A slight pause in the air, as though the entire boutique itself had taken a breath and was waiting to see what would happen next. A few customers exchanged glances, the type of silent, knowing looks people share when they witness something uncomfortable unfolding right in front of them. Eyes flickered from behind phone screens. Whispers hovered just above the ambient music playing softly in the background. People pretended to browse, pretended not to listen, but every single one of them was tuned in, hanging on to what would happen next. Emma Watson remained exactly where she was, holding that breathtaking, hand-stitched gown between her fingers as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. The fabric, delicate and shimmering under the boutique's warm lights, slipped through her hands like water, but her focus never left Vanessa. Emma's expression didn't change. There was no gasp of shock, no flash of anger, no dramatic retort. Instead, there was a calm, effortless composure that seemed almost inhuman, as if she had already predicted this entire encounter before she even stepped foot inside the store. Because people like Vanessa, Emma had met them before, more times than she cared to count. And if Vanessa thought Emma would stammer out an apology, shrink back in embarrassment, or scurry off to avoid making a scene, she was about to be sorely disappointed. Instead, Emma looked her straight in the eyes, her gaze steady and self-assured, and gave the faintest, most knowing smile. The kind of smile that only someone with absolutely nothing to prove can give. The kind that makes the person on the receiving end realize too late that they've made a terrible mistake. Without so much as a pause, Emma tilted her head slightly and responded in a voice so calm and soft it almost didn't match the weight of her words. "Actually, Oscar, I'll take this one." The boutique seemed to fall even quieter. For the briefest moment, Vanessa froze. You could practically see the circuits misfiring in her brain, trying to piece together what was happening. Was Emma joking? Surely she had misunderstood. Vanessa's eyes darted over Emma's outfit again, silently confirming to herself that this woman couldn't possibly afford the gown she was holding. It was one of their most expensive pieces, a custom-designed limited edition dress that had been flown in from Europe just for a select few clients. A dress that was meant to grace red carpets, exclusive charity galas, and magazine covers. And now here was Emma, standing there in sneakers and a sweatshirt, treating the purchase of such a gown as if it were no more significant than picking up a carton of milk. Vanessa forced a laugh. Tight, hollow, forced. Of course, she managed, though every syllable dripped with sarcasm. Let me just get that wrapped up for you. She reached forward, ready to snatch the gown from Emma's hands, perhaps still hoping this was some kind of prank that would end any second. But fate had other plans, because just as Vanessa stretched out her hand, the boutique's entrance chimed, heads turned, and there, as if the universe had scripted the moment itself, stood Bryan Cranston. He didn't just enter the room, he shifted the entire atmosphere. Bryan had that rare kind of presence that didn't need loud words or dramatic gestures. It was just there, quiet, commanding, undeniable. His sharp, tailored coat fit perfectly over his broad shoulders, and his easy smile barely concealed the fact that he had noticed immediately that something was off. Every employee stood a little straighter, every shopper paused mid-browse. Phones discreetly rose from handbags and jacket pockets as people pretended to check notifications, only to record the scene quietly unfolding before them. But Bryan wasn't there for attention. He wasn't there to shop. He didn't even glance at the displays. Instead, he walked straight across the boutique, directly to Emma, and without hesitation, he wrapped her in a warm, familiar hug. Not one of those awkward, polite greetings you give someone you hardly know. This was genuine, long, comfortable, the kind of hug that only happens between two people who truly know each other, two people who share a bond deeper than a passing friendship. "Sorry I'm late," Bryan said, his voice smooth and casual, like they had only been apart a day. "Hope they've been treating you well." And with that, Vanessa's entire world crumbled, because now the truth hit her like a punch to the stomach. The woman she had spent the last half hour belittling, steering toward the clearance section, and suggesting more affordable options to, wasn't just some random shopper who had wandered in off the street. She wasn't some nobody wasting time in a store meant for real clients. She was Emma Watson, and not only that, but she was clearly close, very close, with Bryan Cranston, one of the boutique's most high-profile, cherished clients, a man whose face was known around the globe. The realization washed over Vanessa like ice water. The customers she'd just been trying to impress with her passive-aggressive insults, now they were all staring, watching her disgrace unfold. And Bryan, he didn't miss a beat. He glanced at Vanessa briefly, just long enough to make it perfectly clear he understood exactly what had happened, and then looked back to Emma, gently holding her hand as if anchoring her to the moment. "It's always nice," he said loud enough for the entire store to hear, "to see a business that knows how to treat all of its customers." The words were polite, kind, even, but they landed sharper than any insult. Vanessa's face flushed a deep, burning red. You could almost see her wishing she could disappear through the floor. Whispers spread quickly, rippling through the boutique like waves. Customers who had been observing quietly now began openly murmuring. Someone in the back giggled. A few shook their heads in disapproval. All of Vanessa's careful posturing, the years she spent perfecting the boutique's exclusive atmosphere, collapsed in an instant. But the humiliation wasn't finished. As Emma and Bryan moved toward the register, yes, Emma still fully intent on buying the gown, a ripple effect swept through the boutique. First, a woman set down a handbag she had been admiring and left without a word. Then another man returned a pair of designer sunglasses to their display and walked out. One by one, customers exited the store, quietly severing their ties with the boutique as if being associated with Vanessa's judgmental behavior was too embarrassing to endure. And then came the final blow. From behind the counter, Lily, one of the boutique's younger employees, stepped forward. She had been silently watching the disaster unfold, disgust growing with every passing second. Without hesitation, she unpinned her name tag, placed it delicately on the counter, and approached Emma and Bryan. "I just want you both to know," she said clearly, "that not everyone here believes people should be treated that way. Honestly, I've been thinking about leaving for a while. Today just made the decision easy. If you ever need someone to work for you, I'd love the chance." Emma smiled warmly, thanking her sincerely. Bryan shook her hand and promised to stay in touch. And Vanessa? She could do nothing but watch, powerless, as everything she thought she controlled unraveled in front of her. But the worst part? Someone had been filming the entire thing from the moment Bryan walked in. And by nightfall, the internet had done what it does best. The video was everywhere. Headlines screamed about the boutique manager who dared to insult the wrong customer. Millions watched, millions judged. Appointments were canceled, refunds were demanded. The boutique's reputation shattered overnight. And Vanessa? She was Emma Watson. And not only that, but she was clearly close, very close, with Bryan Cranston, one of the boutique's most high-profile, cherished clients. A man whose face was known around the globe. The realization washed over Vanessa like ice water. The customers she'd just been trying to impress with her passive-aggressive insults. Now they were all staring, watching her disgrace unfold. And Bryan? He didn't miss a beat. He glanced at Vanessa briefly, just long enough to make it perfectly clear he understood exactly what had happened, and then looked back to Emma, gently holding her hand as if anchoring her to the moment. "It's always nice," he said loud enough for the entire store to hear, "to see a business that knows how to treat all of its customers." The words were polite, kind, even, but they landed sharper than any insult. Vanessa's face flushed a deep, burning red. You could almost see her wishing she could disappear through the floor. Whispers spread quickly, rippling through the boutique like waves. Customers who had been observing quietly now began openly murmuring. Someone in the back giggled. A few shook their heads in disapproval. All of Vanessa's careful posturing, the years she spent perfecting the boutique's exclusive atmosphere, collapsed in an instant. But the humiliation wasn't finished. As Emma and Bryan moved toward the register, yes, Emma still fully intent on buying the gown, a ripple effect swept through the boutique. First, a woman set down a handbag she had been admiring and left without a word. Then another man returned a pair of designer sunglasses to their display and walked out. One by one, customers exited the store, quietly severing their ties with the boutique as if being associated with Vanessa's judgmental behavior was too embarrassing to endure. And then came the final blow. From behind the counter, Lily, one of the boutique's younger employees, stepped forward. She had been silently watching the disaster unfold, disgust growing with every passing second. Without hesitation, she unpinned her name tag, placed it delicately on the counter, and approached Emma and Bryan. "I just want you both to know," she said clearly, "that not everyone here believes people should be treated that way. Honestly, I've been thinking about leaving for a while. Today just made the decision easy. If you ever need someone to work for you, I'd love the chance." Emma smiled warmly, thanking her sincerely. Bryan shook her hand and promised to stay in touch. And Vanessa? She could do nothing but watch, powerless, as everything she thought she controlled unraveled in front of her. But the worst part? Someone had been filming the entire thing from the moment Bryan walked in. And by nightfall, the internet had done what it does best. The video was everywhere. Headlines screamed about the boutique manager who dared to insult the wrong customer. Millions watched, millions judged. Appointments were canceled, refunds were demanded. The boutique's reputation shattered overnight. And Vanessa? He simply turned his gaze toward her. One calm, unblinking look. And that was enough. That glance said everything. "Don't stop talking. You've done enough damage." Helena fell silent immediately, her forced smile twitching at the corners, desperate to maintain the last shreds of her dignity, even as they slipped through her fingers. Meanwhile, Emma remained composed, holding the same gown Helena had so confidently tried to keep her from. She turned toward Bryan, her expression so effortlessly graceful, so unbothered, that it almost felt surreal, as though she were starring in a movie and knew exactly how this scene was meant to end. "I was just about to check out," Emma said lightly, her tone warm and easy, like nothing unusual had happened at all. "Looks like I picked the right day to stop by." Bryan gave a quiet chuckle. "Looks that way." But Helena wasn't out of the woods yet. Just as she thought the moment couldn't possibly get worse, Bryan shifted his attention fully back to her. His voice was still calm, conversational even, but his words carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "You know," he began, his tone smooth as silk, "it's funny how some people are so quick to judge, just based on what someone's wearing. Like clothes can actually tell you everything you need to know about a person." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. Around the boutique, customers shifted uncomfortably. You could practically feel the second-hand embarrassment ripple through the room. Some people lowered their eyes, pretending to focus on jewelry displays, while others shot Helena glances filled with quiet pity, the kind reserved for people who've just been publicly, utterly destroyed. Helena opened her mouth to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. I didn't mean..." Bryan gently raised his hand, palm out, not in anger, but with the effortless authority of someone who knew there was nothing left to say. "It's okay," he said with a small, dismissive nod. "We've already seen enough." And just like that, the conversation was over. And so was Helena's illusion of control. But the universe wasn't finished teaching Helena a lesson. Because as if on cue, like a perfectly choreographed finale, a well-dressed woman who had been browsing quietly near the handbags stepped forward, placed the luxury purse she'd been holding back on its shelf with care, and left without saying a word. Then another customer followed, and another, and another. Like a row of dominoes falling in slow motion, the boutique's most loyal, high-spending regulars began filing out the door, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. Nobody made a scene. Nobody needed to. Their silent exits said it all. We want no part of this. It wasn't the merchandise driving them away. It was Helena. And then, as if the scene needed just one final perfect touch, Lily, the boutique's quietest employee, stepped out from behind the counter. She had been watching the entire disaster unfold, her patience thinning with every smug comment Helena had thrown at Emma. Now was her moment. She unpinned her name tag with slow, deliberate movements, set it gently on the counter, and walked directly over to Bryan and Emma. "I'm done here," Lily said, her voice clear and unwavering. "I can't work for someone who treats people like that." The entire boutique seemed to pause again. Helena looked around wildly, as if expecting someone to step in and rescue her from the wreckage. But no one moved. Not the remaining staff, who looked relieved. Not the few lingering customers, who only watched as if attending the final act of a play. And certainly not Bryan or Emma. Emma gave Lily a warm, genuine smile. "Good for you," she said sincerely. "I think you're going to find something much better." Bryan nodded in agreement. "If you're interested, I know people who would be lucky to have someone like you." And that was the final stroke. Helena stood alone now, surrounded by silent racks of untouched designer clothes, the boutique nearly empty except for her own crumbling sense of superiority. And somewhere in the back of the store, from behind a display, a small phone camera's light blinked off. The video? Already online. The views? Rising by the second. And Helena's nightmare? Oh, it was only just getting started. The moment Emma and Bryan stepped out of the boutique, the heavy glass doors whispered shut behind them, sealing off the chaos they left inside. It was as if the entire store finally allowed itself to breathe, the tension that had been strangling the room releasing all at once in an invisible exhale. And yet, for Helena, standing stiff and pale in the middle of the now half-empty boutique, the silence was deafening. She remained frozen, her gaze locked on the door as if willing it to open again, as if somehow they might walk back in and give her a chance to undo what had just happened. But deep down, she knew there are moments in life you can't rewind. Mistakes so colossal, they tattoo themselves onto your reputation permanently. And this was one of them. The fallout wasn't slow, it wasn't quiet, it was instant. Within hours, the video surfaced. Someone had been recording the moment Bryan Cranston walked through the doors, the confusion on Helena's face as she realized who Emma really was, and the sharp, cutting remarks that followed. Before long, that video was everywhere. It flooded social media feeds like a tidal wave. You couldn't scroll for more than a few seconds without seeing Helena's face frozen mid-smirk, or hearing the biting sarcasm in her voice as she so helpfully directed Emma to the clearance rack. But the most brutal part wasn't Helena's sneer. It was the footage of Bryan embracing Emma, speaking those perfectly timed words that flipped the entire room upside down. Side by side, the clips played over and over again online, and with each replay, Helena's humiliation deepened. By the evening, the video had exploded. Millions of views, tens of thousands of comments, hashtags like #RespectPeople, #Karma in Action, and #The Customer. You ignored dominated the trending pages. Comment sections became a flood of disbelief, outrage, and applause. People from all over the world chimed in with their own stories of being underestimated because of their appearance, their clothes, or the way they walked into a room. Others praised Emma's quiet strength, Bryan's perfectly executed timing, and Lily's courageous stand against everything the boutique had come to represent. Then came the memes, the news articles, the talk show mentions. Helena wasn't just a local embarrassment anymore. She became a global symbol of what happens when you let arrogance dictate your actions. By the next morning, the boutique's owner had no choice but to act. Calls were coming in non-stop from angry customers threatening to boycott. Social media accounts were flooded with negative reviews. High-profile clients were pulling out of memberships and canceling their appointments. The boutique that once prided itself on being the very definition of exclusivity and class had turned into a public relations nightmare. When Helena was called into the office, there were no second chances, no warnings, No heartfelt conversations about learning from mistakes. She was fired, swiftly, quietly, without ceremony. Years of curating her image as the poised, untouchable manager of the city's most elite boutique were wiped away in a matter of minutes. She didn't just lose her job, she lost her entire identity. The status, the respect, the illusion of control she had built brick by brick, only to watch it all collapse in a single afternoon. It never fully recovered. The regular clientele vanished. The VIPs who once strutted through the doors without hesitation now refused to be associated with the store. New customers stayed away, wary of becoming the next viral spectacle. And the boutique, once the crown jewel of luxury shopping, became nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in business circles about how quickly a brand's reputation can crumble when the wrong person is treated the wrong way. But for Emma and Bryan, the story didn't end when those glass doors closed. A few days later, far from the noise of trending hashtags and viral videos, they invited Lily to join them at a quiet little cafe. It wasn't one of those overpriced, influencer-filled coffee shops designed for photo ops. It was the kind of place with creaky wooden chairs, soft yellow lighting, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air. The kind of place where real conversations happen and nobody cares what shoes you're wearing. Lily arrived looking nervous, her hands twisting the strap of her purse as if she wasn't entirely sure why they'd wanted to meet. But the moment she stepped inside, Emma greeted her with a warm hug that melted the tension away, and Bryan stood up to pull out her chair as if they'd all known each other for years. "We just wanted to thank you," Emma said genuinely, her eyes kind. "Standing up like you did? That takes guts." Lily blushed, still a bit overwhelmed. "Honestly, I was just tired. Tired of pretending it was okay. That kind of treatment, it never sat right with me." Bryan leaned in with a reassuring smile. "Well, we know some people who are always looking for good people. Real places. The kind that judge you by your work, not your wardrobe. If you're interested, we'd love to introduce you." Lily blinked in surprise, then smiled wide. "Really? That would mean everything." And they meant it. Within days, Bryan made calls. Emma sent emails. Before long, Lily had interviews lined up with companies she'd once thought were beyond her reach. Places where respect wasn't just a word managers threw around, but something woven into the very culture. Places that valued her. As they sat together in that little cafe, coffee cups in hand, the weight of what had happened at the boutique finally felt like it had lifted. They laughed. They swapped stories. They imagined brighter futures that felt, for the first time in a while, entirely possible. And as Emma glanced out the window, watching the soft afternoon light stretch across the street, she spoke one last thought aloud. "You know," she said, almost as if thinking to herself, "people really do get so caught up in appearances. They think luxury is power, that the more expensive something is, the more important it makes them. But real power is knowing how to treat people right. That's what actually lasts." And in that small, quiet moment, with the chaos of the boutique incident finally behind them, it became clear to everyone sitting at that table what Helena never understood. Respect doesn't come with a price tag, and sometimes the most valuable thing you can give someone is kindness. And just like that, what started as a simple shopping trip turned into a powerful reminder that no amount of luxury can replace basic human decency. At the end of the day, kindness costs nothing, but its value lasts forever. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more moments where karma makes things right, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.